Nous sommes live, Cédric.
Ça y est, ça y est. Eh bien, bonjour en live, Marie-Hélène.
Oui,
On, s-
bonjour.
on s'est un petit peu parlé juste avant, mais en anglais. Moi, je suis content de te parler en français, surtout que dans le livre, il y a des passages en français, des tout petits passages en français.
Oui, quand même,
Oui, oui, tu as réussi à introduire un petit peu le langage. Malheureusement, le livre, pour l'instant, il n'existe pas en français. C'est un grand regret. Peut-être ça changera à l'avenir.
oui,
En
c'est
tout
la
cas,
prochaine langue qu'on espère voir venir.
ce serait super. Ce serait super parce que c'est vraiment un bouquin qui apporte des choses que j'ai pas vues dans d'autres livres. Je vais en parler tout à l'heure. Mais apporter ça aux francophones, ce serait bien aussi. Ce serait
Ben
top.
oui, c'est ça l'idée. Et parlant de francophones, parce que nous sommes sur la plateforme ici, LinkedIn,
Mhm.
si les gens vont commencer à se joindre à nous, et évidemment, ce sera enregistré, donc pour ceux et celles pour qui c'est plus pratique d'écouter plus tard, ce sera disponible
Mhm.
sur mon profil LinkedIn, très facile. Mais si vous êtes là, en personne, j'allais dire, en live avec nous, dites-nous bonjour dans le chat, sinon on vous voit pas, en fait. Alors, dites-nous peut-être qui vous êtes, d'où vous nous joignez, pour qu'on puisse dire bonjour et savoir que vous êtes là pour célébrer avec nous. Merci, Cédric.
Ce serait super, ouais. Peut-être qu'on regardera au fur et à mesure les messages que vous nous donnez. Et puis, mais c'est vrai, ce serait sympa de savoir d'où vous venez. Est-ce que vous êtes plutôt en France, peut-être, ou au Canada, ou ailleurs? Parce qu'il y a quand même pas mal de communautés francophones partout. Ça nous
Oui,
intéresse de savoir.
ben oui, et avant, je tiens à remercier Cédric aussi parce que Cédric, donc, est en France. Moi, je viens du Québec. Je suis basée en Colombie-Britannique. Je suis à New York cette semaine. Mais juste pour que les gens sachent, j'ai rencontré Cédric grâce à mon livre. C'est
Ouais.
ça. Parce que grâce à mon livre, j'ai eu la chance de faire partie comme invité d'un podcast, du podcast, de
Mhm.
l'excellent podcast de Cédric. Et donc, par la suite, on est resté en contact et je lui ai demandé de célébrer avec moi aujourd'hui. Alors, merci Cédric. Je
Mais
te donne la parole, mais merci vraiment d'être là.
Mais vraiment, c'est naturel et puis c'est vraiment avec plaisir. D'abord parce que j'avais énormément apprécié notre échange sur le podcast, effectivement. J'avais trouvé plein de pépites, plein de choses intéressantes déjà dans le podcast et puis j'avais beaucoup aimé notre échange. Et puis j'avais lu le livre, mais j'avais pas fait les exercices. Là, j'ai pris un peu de temps, mais pas tellement finalement. Ça a été assez vite parce que c'est un livre qui se lit vraiment facilement. En fait, je l'ai pris, j'ai commencé à le lire et je l'ai quasiment pas reposé parce qu'il est très très facile à lire. Et puis, je sais pas si on voit, je sais pas si vous voyez voilà, il est corné. Il y a plein de pages qui sont cornées. Ça, c'est plutôt bon signe quand je lis un livre et puis que je corne des pages. Et puis, il y a plein de notes que j'ai écrites directement dedans. Et puis, il y a plein de post-it que j'ai mis parce que j'ai fait tous les exercices. Et vraiment, le premier truc, si tu veux, on peut commencer par ça. Je vais vous dire ce que j'ai trouvé vraiment intéressant dans ce livre et que, en fait, ce qui fait l'originalité du livre. Je te propose de commencer par ça, parce que c'est encore frais dans ma tête, puis que voilà, j'ai pris des notes. Et après, si tu es d'accord, j'aurai des questions générale sur à la fois le livre, mais aussi sur le burn-out, la résilience,
Oui,
etc., etc. Mais je trouve que c'est pas mal de commencer par ça un petit peu pour planter le décor.
c'est parfait.
Donc, le premier truc que je voudrais dire, et pour moi, c'est vraiment le truc le plus important, c'est que la promesse du livre est tenue. C'est-à-dire que j'ai fini le livre et j'ai un plan de résilience à la fois pour ma vie professionnelle et ma vie personnelle. Et surtout, c'est un plan que je suis capable de mettre en œuvre. Et c'est ça que j'ai bien aimé, c'est qu'il y a du théorique, tu expliques beaucoup les mécanismes, tu expliques beaucoup ce qui peut arriver au cadre de haut niveau ou aux personnes qui subissent une pression au niveau professionnel, etc. Mais surtout, il y a la partie pragmatique et passage à l'action. Je trouve que tu vois, à la fin de chaque chapitre, il y a un petit plan, puis à chaque fois des exercices à faire qui sont assez faciles à faire et qui sont bien éclairés par ce que tu as dit avant. Il y a aussi beaucoup d'exemples concrets et ça aide beaucoup. Et en fait, je trouve que ce livre-là, il parle vraiment aux managers, aux chefs d'entreprise. C'est-à-dire que le ton et ce qui est dit dans le livre, ça correspond bien à la culture et au tempérament des managers, des cadres et des chefs d'entreprise. tout en ayant bien sûr un fort ancrage médical et scientifique, puisque ce que tu dis, c'est étayé à la fois par des études et à la fois aussi par une pratique que tu as eue dans ce domaine. Donc, premier truc vraiment qui m'a plu, c'est ça, c'est que je trouve que ça parle vraiment à des gens comme nous qui sommes pas des médecins, voilà, mais bon, voilà, on est des gens qui sommes dans l'action. Et ce que je regrettais, moi, dans les autres livres que j'avais lus là-dessus, ou que ce soit des articles, etc., c'est que souvent, ces ouvrages, ils sont focalisés sur le burn-out lui-même, ou son traitement, mais pas tellement sur comment, justement, tu construis ta résilience. Et je pense qu'un cadre, un chef d'entreprise, en fait, ça lui parle plus si on lui dit tu vas construire quelque chose que si on lui dit bon, bah, il faut freiner, il faut te reposer, etc. Je trouve que, tu vois, bon, en tout cas, moi, ça me parle plus. Et puis, j'ai trouvé aussi que tu présentais un petit peu le manager ou le chef d'entreprise un peu comme un athlète de haut niveau. Et en fait, ces gens-là, les athlètes de haut niveau, ils ont des coachs, ils apprennent des compétences et surtout, ils apprennent des stratégies pour réussir. Et j'ai fait le parallèle avec un truc que j'avais lu sur les championnats de slalom, tu sais, sur le ski.
Oui.
Et en fait, il y avait une étude qui avait été faite et qui disait que finalement, c'est pas le meilleur athlète qui réussit, c'est pas le plus fort, c'est celui qui réussit à arriver au championnat sans se blesser. Et qu'ils avaient beau être des super athlètes, super affûtés de haut niveau, s'ils n'avaient pas la stratégie pour éviter les blessures, bah en fait, finalement, ils ne gagnaient pas. Et en fait, un chef d'entreprise, c'est un peu ça aussi. Un manager, c'est un peu ça aussi. C'est t'es performant, ça marche pour toi, etc. Et puis tout d'un coup, ça commence à moins bien marcher. Et si tu n'as pas de stratégie, si tu n'as pas de compétences pour te construire, pour te renforcer, bah ça ne marchera pas, quoi.
Excellente analogie, j'adore. Je l'aime, je la retiens.
Et bah, ouais, trop tard. Le livre est écrit maintenant. Et un autre truc aussi, qui je trouve est pas commun, c'est que tu n'opposes pas la vie professionnelle et la vie personnelle. Moi, j'ai lu pas mal de trucs où, en fait, souvent, on dit, il y a beaucoup d'articles comme ça qui disent, le problème, en fait, tu arrives au burn-out, au quasi-burn-out, parce que, en fait, c'est ta vie professionnelle qui est trop importante par rapport à ta vie personnelle. Et puis, on en reste là. On dit, faut juste équilibrer l'une et l'autre, passer moins de temps au boulot, puis ça va aller. Et moi, ce que j'aime bien dans ton livre, c'est que c'est pas ton discours. Ton discours, c'est la vie professionnelle et la vie pro, c'est une vie, c'est-à-dire, il y a les deux dans la vie. Et dans chacune de ces deux vies, il y a des aspects qui vont consommer de la résilience et des aspects qui vont fournir de la résilience ou de l'énergie, je ne sais pas comment on peut appeler ça. Et que ce soit la vie professionnelle ou pro, eh ben, il y a les deux dans chacune des vies. Et moi, à un moment, tu montres un tableau, tu nous demandes de remplir un tableau où on doit mettre les activités qui nous consomment de l'énergie, de la résilience, un peu les challenges qu'on va avoir dans notre vie pro, mais aussi dans notre vie perso. Et puis à côté, dans l'autre colonne, tu dis, et c'est quoi maintenant les activités qui vont te permettre de fournir de l'énergie? Un petit peu comme en comptabilité, un tableau à double les emplois et les ressources, tu vois, on a ça en comptabilité en France. Et ça m'a fait penser à ça. Et j'ai trouvé ça vraiment intéressant parce que ça permet de se dire, non, en fait, voilà, j'ai ma trame de temps, c'est-à-dire j'ai mon agenda personnel et professionnel. Et dans cet agenda, eh bien, je peux avoir des choses qui vont me manger de la résilience et des choses qui vont me construire de la résilience. Et en fait, il faut que je programme ça. Et ça, à nouveau, c'est une super approche parce que je trouve que ça nous parle à nous qui sommes dans le milieu de l'entreprise. De dire, bah ouais, tu as une stratégie, tu la mets en place, un petit peu comme une gestion de projet ou une stratégie, etc. Et tu peux vraiment le faire de manière assez pragmatique. Et puis après, il y a un dernier point. Après, on passe aux questions.
Cédric, je t'interromps, juste une petite pause logistique parce que quelqu'un essaie d'écouter la traduction, en fait, alors que ça ne fonctionnera pas très bien. Sandra, probably Chloe will respond to you in the background, but we are doing an English launch in an hour from now. That will be in English. That's the better moment to listen because, yes, the translation is probably not doing great. So, Sandra, join later if you'd like, or you could stay with us still.
Ou alors c'est mon français qui n'est pas traduisible. Ça peut
Non, non,
arriver.
non. Non, 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 non. Mais je voulais au moins m'assurer que Sandra le savait. Merci, Cédric. Ah, continue. Tu allais dire un dernier point, je crois, puis c'est
Il y a
tellement
un dernier,
important du livre. Oui.
un dernier truc qui, pour moi, est assez symptomatique et puis en fait, qui résume aussi bien le livre, c'est qu'en fait, la partie sur les congés maladie ou sur les congés qu'on doit prendre quand on est vraiment fatigué, elle arrive à la fin du livre. C'est un des derniers chapitres. Et je trouve ça intéressant parce que dans beaucoup de choses que j'ai lues, on commence par ça. On commence par dire, ah ben, et c'est assez logique quand on l'entend comme ça, bah ouais, t'es crevé, t'en peux plus, etc. Il faut prendre un congé et puis tu vas te reposer, puis ça va aller mieux. Et moi, je trouve plus intéressant, effectivement, avant d'en arriver là, de se dire, mais non, je ne dois pas en arriver là, en fait. C'est-à-dire, qu'est-ce que je construis dans ma vie, pro et perso, pour ne pas en arriver là. Et même si j'en arrive là, à un moment, tu te dis, un des mythes, c'est, ben, en fait, il suffit de s'arrêter, de se reposer, puis ça ira mieux, et de rien faire, en fait, finalement. Et puis tu vas revenir et ça ira mieux. Et ça marche pas, ça. Parce que ça, moi, je vois, je côtoie beaucoup de cadres qui sont extrêmement sollicités. Donc, ils vont bourriner, ils vont travailler comme des malades pendant le temps de travail. Puis après, ils vont être complètement épuisés. Du coup, ils vont partir en congé. Là, bah, ils vont dormir, ils vont même tomber malades en général parce que tout leur corps, tout ça s'est épuisé. Et puis, ils vont quand même se reposer, puis ils vont revenir, puis ils vont recommencer, et puis ça fait une espèce de spirale comme ça, infernale, et en fait, petit à petit, ils ne s'en rendent pas compte, mais ils déclinent de plus en plus, jusqu'à arriver à un âge, moi ça m'est arrivé, j'ai eu une discussion il n'y a pas très longtemps avec quelqu'un, un gars qui a le même âge que moi d'ailleurs, 55 ans, et qui disait non, mais en fait, ce qui se passe, c'est que maintenant je suis vieux, donc c'est normal. Et je lui disais, mais non, c'est pas ça, c'est un problème d'énergie, c'est un problème de gestion. Normalement, justement, quand tu es plus âgé, tu as appris justement à justement gérer ton énergie, etc. Et voilà, ce que je veux dire, c'est que l'erreur, ce serait de croire qu'il suffit de s'arrêter, puis de pas mettre en place un plan, parce qu'en fait, c'est pas ça qui va vous permettre d'éviter le burn-out. Finalement, ce qui va vous permettre de construire votre résilience, en fait, ce qui va vous permettre d'éviter le burn-out, c'est de construire votre résilience. Et pour construire votre résilience, c'est mieux d'avoir un plan. Ça, j'en suis convaincu depuis longtemps. Et moi, tu vois, c'est ça. Ces genres de livres, en fait, c'est une révélation. C'est-à-dire que tu dis des trucs qu'on ressent, dont on s'était rendu compte. Mais là, tu mets des mots et tu mets un plan en face. Donc, je trouve que c'est plus intéressant. Voilà, j'ai beaucoup parlé. Maintenant, ça va être ton tour, si tu es d'accord. Alors, j'ai des questions très simples, et puis après, on discutera, si tu veux, au fur et à mesure. Et puis, n'hésitez pas, si vous êtes en langue française, que vous comprenez ce qu'on dit, à aussi poser des questions dans le chat. On les relaiera je regarderai les questions au fur et à mesure, et puis je verrai s'il y a des choses auxquelles je n'avais pas pensé. La première question que j'ai envie de te poser, Marie-Hélène, c'est, en fait, finalement, qu'est-ce que c'est en vrai le burn-out? Qu'est-ce que c'est que ce truc, le burn-out? Parce que je sais qu'on n'a pas tous une définition forcément très précise là-dessus.
Et en fait, il y a une définition très précise qui est utile comme telle, mais en fait, même si on ne rencontre pas tous les critères, c'est quand même très important de porter attention, même si on a seulement un ou deux de ces trois critères-là. Donc, l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, c'est l'organisme des Nations unies qui a créé cette définition-là. 3 symptômes. 1, on est exténué. 2, on vit du cynisme, donc pas d'espoir que les choses vont changer. Et troisièmement, ça a un impact sur notre performance. Et le burn-out et l'épuisement professionnel, c'est un phénomène occupationnel. Donc, ce n'est pas un diagnostic.
Okay.
Donc, ce qu'on dit, c'est que et c'est quelque chose qui va apparaître dans notre relation avec le travail. Donc, ce n'est pas entièrement de notre faute comme individu. Ce n'est pas entièrement, habituellement, la faute de l'employeur. C'est souvent dans la relation. Oui, si on avait un instrument précis pour nous dire OK, donc c'est 97% travail et 3% Cédric. OK, bon, ce serait intéressant. Mais très souvent, c'est un ensemble de variables. C'est dans la relation. Et ce que ça veut dire, c'est qu'en fait, il y a des rôles pour tout le monde dans ce système-là. Dans mon livre, on fait un focus un peu plus sur quelles sont les choses qui sont entre nos mains, comme professionnels et comme leaders. Mais bref, c'est ça, donc la définition de burn-out. Et donc, souvent, on en parle comme si on parlait simplement, uniquement d'être exténué, d'un point de vue énergie. Et là, je ne voudrais pas que les gens se disent « Ah, ben finalement, vu que je n'ai pas de cynisme et que ma performance n'en est pas affectée, ça va. » Non, au contraire, on va être proactif, proactive. Donc, on voudrait porter attention quand même. Ouais.
Ok, super. Tu vois, alors, c'est quoi, selon les observations, le meilleur indicateur ou le meilleur proxy, je crois que tu utilises ce terme-là dans le livre, pour se rendre compte qu'on commence à partir en burn-out?
Mm-hmm.
Le meilleur indicateur.
Et je t'en donne quelques-uns, Cédric, parce que, bon, si on part de la définition du burn-out comme tel, donc avant d'être exténué, on va sentir qu'on a moins d'énergie. Mais
C'est
souvent,
ça.
ce qui arrive, c'est qu'on ne porte pas attention, on dit c'est pas grave, on dit c'est normal, on continue. La deuxième, avant d'être rendu au cynisme, on va être moins engagé dans notre travail, on va avoir moins envie de le faire, on va se sentir moins satisfait, satisfaite. Puis avant de se rendre dans les erreurs professionnelles, bien, on va se rendre compte qu'il y a en fait plus de petites choses qu'on oublie, plus de petites erreurs, qu'on fait des erreurs un peu plus grosses, parce que on en fait parfois des erreurs, on en fait des oublis, ça arrive, c'est certain,
Bien
c'est
sûr.
certain. Mais éventuellement, on sait d'habitude notre quantité, notre type d'erreur. Là, ça commence à être plus souvent et plus sévère aussi. Donc, ça, c'est des signes plus reliés au burn-out comme tel, à l'épuisement professionnel. Mais aussi, il y a des signes parce que si on continue dans le burn-out, on va se rendre dans des diagnostics, on va se rendre dans des dépressions, dans des troubles d'anxiété. Et donc, d'autres signes auxquels on veut porter attention, c'est une moins bonne concentration, une difficulté à prendre des décisions, plus d'impatience, de frustration. Ce sont des exemples, il y en a d'autres, mais ce sont quelques exemples que souvent avec les gens avec qui je travaille vont reconnaître.
C'est clair. Et moi, j'ai été confronté, voilà, évidemment, hein, comme tout le monde en tant que chef d'entreprise, à des gens qui étaient en burn-out. Et c'est la première fois que je lisais qu'il y avait le cynisme dans les signes. Et moi, en fait, je me rends compte avec le recul en lisant le livre que, effectivement, dans les cas que j'ai connus, il y avait ça. C'est-à-dire que moi, je n'avais pas détecté que la personne, elle faisait des erreurs, qu'elle était moins concentrée, qu'elle était plus fatiguée, etc. Je ne le voyais pas forcément, je pense, parce que la personne, je ne vivais pas au quotidien avec elle, et que même si elle faisait des erreurs, elle les corrigeait, même si elle était fatiguée, elle le montrait pas forcément, etc. Par contre, le discours, oui, ça, il avait changé, et il y avait beaucoup de cynisme sur les autres, sur l'entreprise, sur la vie à l'extérieur de l'entreprise, etc. Ce qui était très rare dans la voix de ces gens-là, qui étaient plutôt des high performers, des gens qui performaient beaucoup, et tout d'un coup, ils devenaient un peu critiques, surtout, ils faisaient de l'humour, mais de l'humour, tu vois, cynique, etc., etc. Et j'ai trouvé que c'était intéressant que tu mettes ça. Alors, ça ne veut pas dire que tous les gens qui sont cyniques sont en burn-out, évidemment, mais j'ai trouvé que c'était vraiment intéressant. Ce symptôme-là était intéressant. Ce serait quoi tout à l'heure, j'ai un petit peu introduit le concept d'avoir des activités ou des attitudes ou des comportements qui permettent de construire la résilience et donc d'éviter le burn-out. Qu'est-ce que tu nous dis là-dessus? C'est quoi les meilleures sources pour construire cette résilience? Ce qui a été prouvé scientifiquement ou observé empiriquement.
Oui, et je dirais une combinaison. Il y a plusieurs allées qu'on peut considérer. Commençons par la base, les choix qu'on fait dans notre style de vie. Donc, et on les connaît, je suis pas mal certaine, si on demandait à tout le monde sur la rue quelles sont les quelques 2 ou 3 choses qu'on devrait tous et toutes faire pour augmenter notre résilience de façon proactive, on les entendrait. Hein? On les connaît. Bon, il y a l'exercice, mais là, ce qui est intéressant, c'est que dans l'exercice, il y a quand même trois trucs. Il y a l'exercice de façon cardio, l'entraînement en force, puis aussi les activités de type méditative, comme yoga, méditation. OK, bon. Exercice, nutrition. Beaucoup de la recherche est focusée sur la diète méditerranéenne. Donc, ça ne veut pas dire que les autres sont plus ou moins bonnes, mais c'est ça que la recherche, ce vers quoi la recherche s'est tournée, qui a quand même aussi beaucoup d'avantages côté santé physique. Donc, on y gagne d'une façon ou d'une autre. Notre sommeil, 7 à 8 heures par nuit, et passer du temps avec des gens avec qui on a envie de passer du temps. Donc, nos relations. Ça, c'est des aspects style de vie. On sait aussi que plus on va avoir des moments de pause dans nos vies, des petites pauses, des moyennes, des plus grandes aussi. Donc, souvent avoir des bonnes limites sur la quantité de travail qu'on fait. Avoir conscience de nos valeurs comme individus et de faire des choix dans comment on utilise notre temps qui sont alignés avec ces valeurs-là. Donc, tu vois, il y a des trucs côté style de vie, il y a des trucs d'autres dans le domaine des choix qu'on fait reliés à notre travail, choix qu'on fait reliés à notre vie personnelle, qui, plus on aligne tout ça avec ce qui est sain de ce qu'on sait de la recherche et ce qui est sain pour nous, et plus on bâtit.
D'accord, ok. Ouais, c'est plus large que simplement le sommeil, les relations. Tu parles beaucoup, effectivement, dans le livre des valeurs. Et ça aussi, c'est un truc qui m'a un petit peu interpellé et j'ai trouvé ça vraiment pertinent dans cette optique-là. Je pense que ça peut être épuisant de travailler dans un contexte où, en fait, on n'est pas aligné avec les valeurs intrinsèques qu'on a, quoi. C'est clair.
Oui.
Un autre truc qui m'a aussi, je te disais, c'est le fait que tu fasses pas de séparation, enfin, tu n'opposes pas la vie personnelle et la vie professionnelle. Tu avais donné un exemple à un moment, alors je ne sais pas si tu t'en souviens, d'une fille qui avait une vie personnelle tellement débordante et trépidante que finalement, ce n'était pas source de résilience.
Oui, oui, mais oui. Et voici pourquoi ça, c'est important. C'est que souvent, quand dans mon travail, dans mes conférences avec des professionnels, des leaders, tout ça, évidemment, c'est des gens qui accomplissent beaucoup de choses, qui adorent ça, qui ont de l'énergie, de la passion. Bon, parfois plus que d'autres, mais quand même, on aime, on aime. Et donc, ce qui a tendance à arriver, c'est lorsqu'on explore, OK, quelles sont toutes les choses, vos sources de demande, entre autres, bien, les gens vont avoir tendance à aller me chercher les trucs qu'ils préféreraient pas avoir. Donc, les demandes difficiles, stressantes, désagréables qui sont présentes, par exemple, dans le contexte professionnel. Et oui, c'est certain que ça fait partie des demandes. Et là, si je leur demande d'explorer un peu, bien, ils vont aller ajouter des demandes, encore une fois, dites négatives, côté personnel, des trucs qu'ils veulent pas, des relations difficiles. Bon, OK. Et après ça, on continue et OK, mais on parle aussi des autres demandes, les demandes dites positives. Donc, la promotion qu'on voulait vraiment, le très gros partenariat dans le domaine professionnel qu'on voulait et que là, oui, ça y va, c'est excellent, c'est extrêmement excitant et c'est une demande significative. Même chose côté personnel. Et c'est ça l'exemple dont tu nous rappelles, c'est ça, c'est que les professionnels et leaders sont tellement focusés sur accomplir beaucoup, quasiment comme si on avait un biais positif, finalement. On est biaisé de façon optimiste. Ça a beaucoup d'avantages, ça nous permet de foncer, ça nous permet d'ignorer des barrières qu'on doit parfois ignorer pour avancer, c'est parfait. On doit aussi parfois prendre un peu de recul pour pouvoir voir c'est quoi notre réalité présentement dans notre contexte et qui, oui, va inclure les demandes négatives, mais aussi les demandes positives.
C'est pour ça, tout à l'heure, j'ai dit dépenses et ressources,
Oui.
et tu dis demande. Et c'est peut-être un mot plus juste d'abord. Et effectivement, moi, je me suis rendu compte d'un truc, tu vois, quand j'ai fait l'exercice, par exemple, j'ai mis le sport en ressources. Parce que pour moi, faire du sport, justement, c'est un moyen d'évacuer le stress, d'avoir une dépense physique, etc., etc. Puis après, j'ai réfléchi à mon passé. Et moi, en fait, il y a un moment, j'ai été peut-être positivement influencé. J'ai eu ce biais positif. Et en fait, je faisais trop de sport. C'est-à-dire que ce qui était au départ une ressource, c'est devenu une demande. C'est-à-dire que je croyais, en faisant plein de sport, etc., dès que j'avais un temps libre, je croyais que j'allais rééquilibrer mon énergie alors que j'en dépensais encore plus. Ouais. Et ça, c'est aussi un truc qu'on voit souvent. C'est-à-dire que en général, quelqu'un qui est très impliqué dans l'entreprise, il est aussi très impliqué dans sa vie perso. Et il ne se rend pas compte aussi que ça lui mange de l'énergie. Et qu'il y a une manière de faire les choses où, au contraire, ça donne de l'énergie. Et j'avais trouvé ça intéressant. Ouais, c'était l'exemple que j'avais...
Oui, et à réévaluer régulièrement, je dirais, parce que c'est ça. Il y a peut-être eu un moment où la même quantité d'exercice était en fait parfaite, mais là, si on garde la même quantité d'exercice dans notre contexte actuel, ça se peut que ça ne le soit pas. L'autre chose que j'entends parfois aussi par rapport aux activités sportifs, c'est que parfois, ils vont être dans les deux colonnes en même temps.
Ouais.
Comme des fois, les gens vont dire, ouais, moi, j'adore jouer au golf, ça représente une source d'énergie pour moi. Et parfois, c'est tellement frustrant que finalement, c'est une demande.
Ouais.
Alors, ça peut être, il y a des choses qui peuvent être dans les deux colonnes.
Ou la personne qui est très compétitrice et puis qui fait aussi en parallèle de sa vie des marathons, des machins où elle doit arriver premier, etc., etc. Et en fait, ça équilibre pas du tout l'énergie, effectivement. Alors, comment on passe à l'action? Alors, tu vois, là, on a expliqué de la théorie, etc. C'est quoi en fait, tu vas pas nous donner tout le framework, mais c'est quoi en fait, comment on passe à l'action une fois qu'on a compris ta théorie? C'est-à-dire que tu dis un plan de résilience. OK, c'est quoi? C'est des habitudes, c'est des exercices, c'est quoi en fait? Comment je passe à l'action?
Ben oui, et on passe à l'action, en fait, de la même façon, parce que c'est comme ça que je suis arrivée un peu à utiliser cette façon de penser-là. C'est que j'avais des clients avec qui je travaillais puis qui me posaient la même question. Et là, éventuellement, dans une des conversations, dans plusieurs conversations, en fait, c'est venu comme ça, où là, je disais, ben alors, si on était dans un contexte d'affaires ici et qu'on avait une excellente nouvelle idée pour une nouvelle ligne de produits, est-ce qu'on aurait notre excellente idée et on implante directement, ou bien on aurait notre excellente idée et on irait voir qui d'autre offre des services semblables à ceux-là, combien, à quel prix, qui achète ce type de service-là, quelles forces dans le futur vont avoir un impact sur ce service-là, tout ça. On irait voir l'environnement. Et donc, c'est en fait les mêmes choses, les mêmes façons qu'on aurait ici d'aller chercher cette information-là que je propose de faire ici pour nous. Et ce qui est fascinant, c'est que, bon, les gens qui utilisent déjà ces façons de travailler-là le voient immédiatement, mais tout le monde le voit immédiatement aussi. C'est très facile, même si on n'a pas utilisé ces mêmes outils-là. Alors, ce que je fais pour revenir à ta question, c'est que je dis, OK, d'abord, augmentons notre niveau de clarté au niveau personnel présentement sur nos valeurs. On en a parlé un peu tantôt. Alors, on a cette clarté-là. Ensuite, on augmente notre clarté sur nos sources d'énergie puis les demandes auxquelles on fait face. On augmente notre clarté sur notre contexte aussi, au niveau personnel puis aussi ce qui est autour de nous, pour vraiment comprendre tout ce qui peut avoir un impact sur comment ça va présentement. Puis ensuite, même chose qu'on ferait dans le domaine des affaires ici, on crée notre stratégie. Donc, littéralement, si on le faisait par écrit, on aurait, bon, peut-être en haut de la feuille, augmenter ma résilience, par exemple, mais ça peut être différent. Ça pourrait être aussi avoir d'encore meilleures limites, gérer mon temps de façon plus efficace. Bon, ça dépend des gens. Mais si on y va pour le thème plus global du livre, augmenter ma résilience, ensuite, on créerait potentiellement 3 piliers, disons, 3 piliers stratégiques. Pourquoi 3? Parce que c'est un bon chiffre. Des fois, 3, 4, probablement pas plus que 5 parce que là, on va se perdre dans trop d'initiatives. Mais souvent, je trouve que 3, c'est une très bonne façon, surtout qu'on a beaucoup d'autres choses à faire. Donc, 3 piliers qui vont être informés pour chacune d'entre nous par toute cette réflexion-là qu'on a fait ici. Donc, si on a quelqu'un, par exemple, qui a remarqué dans ses valeurs, qui valorisait beaucoup la santé, la famille, les amis, qui est dans un contexte où ils travaillent tout le temps, qui se font toujours demander beaucoup de trucs puis qui disent oui à tout, ben peut-être que l'un des piliers, ça va être d'augmenter mes limites. Hein? Et peut-être qu'un autre pilier va être de diversifier comment je prends soin de ma santé. Donc, on verra c'est quoi le troisième. Et dans chacun des piliers, ensuite, on va chercher des actions, on va créer pour nous. Donc, c'est comme toi, tu as créé dans ton plan, moi pour le mien, des actions qui sont très faciles à implanter. Parce que là, la prochaine erreur, c'est que nos amis professionnels et leaders, incluant toi et moi, on va se remettre des grosses actions. Et non, ça ne mènera pas à un succès. Donc, on l'ajuste vraiment pour que ce soit stable. Et c'est pour ça qu'on se retrouve finalement avec un plan qui nous convient, qui est complètement aligné avec notre contexte et qui est facile à implanter.
OK. Moi, justement, j'ai repris mes 3 piliers. Donc, il y a par exemple, ça peut être la simplification.
Oui.
C'est un des piliers que j'ai choisi, tu vois. Les relations. Et puis, la gestion de l'énergie, je l'ai mis aussi. Et après, j'ai mis ces actions et après, je me suis rendu compte que ouais, c'était assez simple, en fait, finalement, de commencer par implanter des petits trucs et puis de grandir après en fonction de ça. Est-ce qu'une fois qu'on a établi ça, en fait, ça y est, on a notre plan et puis on va pouvoir le garder tout le temps, le même plan, toute la vie comme ça?
Ben, on va garder, si on veut, la structure, la, la, la pratique d'avoir un plan, mais le plan comme tel, puisqu'il est particulier à notre contexte actuel, bien, il va devoir évoluer avec notre contexte. De la même façon, encore une fois, hein, si on était ici dans une entreprise, on a créé un plan stratégique pour un nouveau produit ou pour les prochaines initiatives de l'entreprise, bien, le plan n'est pas statique et n'est pas créé pour toujours non plus. Je sais que tu le sais, mais on en fait pour la conversation. Mais le parallèle est vraiment là. Ici, on va avoir créé notre plan stratégique, on va commencer à l'implanter et souvent, ce qui fait partie d'un exercice comme celui-là, c'est d'évaluer comment ça va, évidemment.
Oui.
D'évaluer comment le plan performe et d'ajuster ou de savoir que c'est certain que dans 3 mois, on s'assoit, on revoit comment le plan va parce que le contexte change très vite ou dans 6 mois, parce qu'on sait qu'il va changer dans 6 mois, peu importe, ou au besoin. Donc, même chose pour nous ici. On réévalue. Et c'est intéressant parce que j'avais... Dans le processus de me rendre à l'écriture du livre, bon, il y a toutes sortes d'étapes, évidemment, mais l'une des étapes pour moi, c'était de, en fait, faire un atelier sur les exercices du livre pour voir comment ça va, les ajuster, les améliorer. Et il y a une personne qui était dans celui-là, qui a fait son plan. Merci, très contente, OK. Plus tard, ils m'ont contacté pour dire hey, est-ce que tu pourrais venir dans notre entreprise faire l'atelier pour les leaders de notre section? Oui, absolument. Donc, 3 mois plus tard, je suis maintenant en personne, je rencontre la personne qui était en virtuel, sinon la première fois, c'était fantastique. Et là, elle était assise à l'arrière, là, laissant les autres faire l'atelier. Mais là, elle est venue me voir à la fin et elle me dit quelle merveille! En fait, elle me dit j'ai décidé de refaire l'exercice, puisque ce qu'elle s'était rendue compte, c'est comment, vu qu'elle avait fait son plan il y a quelques mois et implanté, parce qu'il était facile à implanter, elle était en fait rendue à recréer un nouveau plan pour les prochains mois. Et donc, c'est un moment assez intéressant pour elle et très merveilleux pour moi aussi parce qu'elle voyait son évolution. Donc, déjà, bravo, je suis très contente. Et ça marche, donc je le refais, je continue. Et donc, oui, on adapte.
Et c'est vrai que ça aussi, c'est un parallèle avec l'entreprise, c'est-à-dire que tu mets en place des plans et puis tu interagis avec ton contexte et tu remets en cause, etc., etc. Et effectivement, moi, par exemple, le plan que j'ai fait, j'ai mis, c'est pour 3 mois. Et dans 3 mois, est-ce que je continuerai le même ou j'en ferai un autre? Je ne le sais pas encore, finalement. Et c'est aussi rassurant de se dire ça, de se dire, mais en fait, parce qu'à un moment, tu te dis, ouais, mais 3 piliers, moi j'en avais noté, je sais plus, 11. Alors tu dis, ouais, mais les autres, etc. Et en fait, le fait de te dire, non, mais ça c'est pour 3 mois, c'est pas grave. Tu te dis, mais dans 3 mois, on verra. J'aurais performé j'aurais plus besoin de ce pilier-là, j'en prendrai un autre, etc. Ok. Et ça m'étonne pas ce que tu dis que tu as fait des ateliers, tout ça, parce qu'on le sent en fait quand les questions, on sent que ça a été travaillé, que c'est pas juste théorique en fait. C'est ça qui j'ai trouvé que c'était intéressant aussi. Combien de temps on a encore, Marie-Helene?
Ensemble, juste toi et moi, une 15, 20 minutes. Puis ensuite, on va avoir Chester, Elton qui se joint à nous un peu en anglais. Puis ensuite, je fais une autre conversation en anglais.
Ça marche. J'ai encore quelques questions. C'est pour ça que je te demandais ça. Ce serait quoi pour toi, puisque tu es intervenu dans des entreprises, les principaux obstacles à une meilleure sensibilisation à la santé mentale sur le lieu de travail? C'est-à-dire que le livre, il s'adresse à des individus. Hein. Clairement, c'est toi qui te prends en charge, mais il y a aussi l'aspect entreprise. Et peut-être que ça intéresse les chefs d'entreprise qui nous écoutent, ou même les cadres. C'est comment on pourrait mieux sensibiliser là-dessus. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, il y a plein de gens, ils vont pas bien, mais ils s'en rendent même pas compte eux-mêmes, leur direction non plus, et encore moins l'ensemble de l'entreprise.
Oui, non, c'est une question extrêmement importante et même bien que, effectivement, comme tu le dis, le livre est plus... il faut choisir à qui on parle. Donc, dans ce livre, je parle à l'individu, mais je fais quand même état dans le livre du fait que lorsqu'on regarde notre résilience professionnelle en milieu de travail, comme la santé mentale aussi en milieu de travail, c'est vraiment un système et ce serait complètement manquer d'informations que de penser que c'est juste l'individu, mais aussi de dire que c'est juste l'organisation. Alors, si on prend encore plus de perspective et que c'est ça, on parle de le plus grand sujet de la santé mentale en milieu de travail, et là, tu vas voir, il y a plusieurs quand même façons d'y penser qui vont être semblables à ce que j'applique ici aussi, parce que la première chose que je dirais, c'est qu'on doit être stratégique. Souvent, la façon dont les choses commencent, c'est plus tactique. Et c'est très bien que ça commence tactique parce que commencer stratégique est parfois vu comme trop gros, trop grand, doit impliquer plein de monde et là, finalement, on ne fait rien. Alors, on commence tactique, présentation ici, atelier là, parler un peu plus des ressources auxquelles on a accès. Ça commence souvent par des trucs comme ça, assez ponctuels, tactiques. Mais aussi rapidement que possible, en fait, ce qu'on veut, c'est prendre une perspective et regarder dans notre entreprise ou même dans notre équipe. Parce que parfois, l'entreprise comme telle porte moins attention à la santé mentale pour l'instant. C'est moins sur leur radar. Ça va le devenir ou ça l'est peut-être, mais différemment. Mais fondamentalement, qu'on soit dans une équipe ou dans l'organisation, on doit penser système. Et l'une des bonnes façons de commencer, c'est de regarder ce qu'on a déjà. Ces tactiques-là, les petites choses qu'on a déjà faites, qu'est-ce qu'on a déjà? Et parfois, la première action la plus simple, ça va en fait d'être de faire un peu plus de ce qu'on fait déjà, mais de façon encore plus délibérée. Et ça demande habituellement pas de budget, pas de permission, pas de grosses actions, et ça fait qu'on peut commencer à poser des gestes parce que ce qu'on veut vraiment, c'est commencer à avoir plus de mouvement, de momentum, comme on dit. Mais si on a en fait plusieurs personnes qui sont vraiment d'accord pour dire oui, on doit porter plus attention, bien là, à ce moment-là, c'est de potentiellement créer un comité, par exemple, pour oui, regarder qu'est-ce qu'on fait déjà, mais aussi évaluer comment on va par rapport à plusieurs autres critères. Et là, il y a plusieurs sources de critères. L'un des exemples étant canadienne, je vous parle peut-être de la Commission canadienne de la santé mentale qui a créé un standard pour la santé psychologique en milieu de travail qui contient 13 facteurs.
OK.
Donc, par exemple, la charge de travail, le niveau d'implication et d'influence que les équipes et les employés peuvent avoir. Il y en a plusieurs comme ça, 13. Et ça peut être une façon de commencer à dire, OK, comment on va par rapport à ces différents facteurs-là? Et encore une fois, allons-y de façon plus restreinte, sur lequel on peut commencer. Et là, il y a plusieurs autres étapes aussi. Par exemple, on peut dire, regardons toutes les données auxquelles on a accès. Est-ce qu'on a accès à de l'information sur notre taux d'absentéisme, notre taux d'utilisation de différentes ressources auxquelles on a accès, pour commencer à lire dans l'ensemble de ces données-là comment on va comme entreprise ou comme équipe, au-delà de mon impression comme leader. Hein, parce que parfois, l'impression de la personne qui est en charge de l'équipe ne sera pas aussi bonne qu'on croit. On pense qu'on comprend, on pense qu'on sait, on pense qu'on a demandé, tout ça. Et oui, toutes ces choses-là, ce sont des bonnes sources d'information, mais on doit aussi aller en chercher d'autres pour avoir des sources diversifiées, pour avoir une meilleure lecture qui ensuite va informer notre plan stratégique.
En plus, moi, je me dis que si en tant que chef d'entreprise, on se fixe comme objectif d'avoir des équipes qui vont bien et qui s'épanouissent, et qu'on crée une culture d'entreprise où finalement, aller dans l'entreprise, ça va plus être une source de ressourcement que de stress, ou d'accomplissement plutôt que d'asservissement, on fait d'une pierre. Moi, je pense qu'on fait d'une pierre deux coups, c'est-à-dire que à la fois, oui, tu vas permettre à des gens d'aller mieux, et puis je pense que c'est générateur de meilleures performances, de toute façon. Je veux dire, on sait très bien que les plus grosses bêtises qui ont été faites dans les entreprises, elles ont été faites par des gens qui étaient surmenés et qui avaient perdu peut-être leur bon sens, ou qui étaient fatigués, stressés, etc. Et dans ces cas-là, on risque de faire des erreurs. J'ai vu un article d'ailleurs il n'y a pas longtemps, un peu un clin d'œil qu'un journaliste avait fait sur le chef du gouvernement français, Monsieur Attal, en disant qu'il était connu pour dormir très peu, etc., etc. Et en fait, le journaliste disait que ça l'inquiétait parce qu'il se disait, mais c'est quand même des gens qui prennent des décisions au plus haut niveau. Et est-ce qu'il faut valoriser le fait qu'ils réussissent à peu dormir ? En général, il vaut mieux avoir bien dormi pour prendre de grandes décisions. Voilà. Et effectivement, je pense que moi, ce que j'ai bien aimé aussi, c'est que le fait que tu ne dises pas, en fait, la vie perso, c'est là où on va recharger ses batteries, et la vie professionnelle, c'est là où on va les dépenser. Parce que je pense que dans notre vie privée, il y a aussi plein de choses qui sont stressantes, ou dans la vie de tous les jours, dans les médias, etc. Et je pense que l'entreprise, ça peut être aussi un endroit où, bah non, on peut s'accomplir et puis on peut créer sa résilience. Et j'ai trouvé que voilà, ce message, il était hyper intéressant dans ton livre. Est-ce que, peut-être pour arriver vers la conclusion, ce serait quoi pour toi les points principaux que tu voudrais que les lecteurs retiennent du livre? Et pour toi, ce serait quoi les 3 ou les 4 ou 5, je sais pas, piliers du livre? C'est-à-dire, j'ai fini le livre, c'est quoi le message important ou c'est quoi les techniques importantes que je devrais avoir retenues, les points principaux?
Oui, oui, et question intéressante parce que plus, vu que le livre, là, est arrivé, il y a eu plusieurs personnes qui l'ont lu à l'avance un peu aussi. Donc, je vois un peu ce que certaines personnes apportent et il y a quand même une assez grande diversité. Hein. Il y a les gens qui vont passer à travers relativement rapidement, puis je décris pour que ce soit faisable comme ça.
Ouais.
Et aussi, il y a les gens qui disent, ah, moi, j'ai pris un temps d'arrêt, j'ai pensé, j'ai incubé, je suis revenue. Donc, vraiment, ça dépend. Et c'est parfait, c'est merveilleux. C'est ça qu'on veut, prendre le temps qu'on a besoin et dans le contexte actuel. Je te dirais que 3 choses que j'entends et qui étaient, oui, aussi mon intention. L'une et la première, donc elles sont dans l'ordre finalement, c'est d'augmenter, et attention, là, reste avec moi pendant que je dis ça, d'augmenter notre niveau de conscience de comment on va. Et là, habituellement, tous les leaders me disent oui, 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 oui. Passons au prochain item. Non, c'est ça. Là. Pour beaucoup des personnes avec qui je travaille, ça veut dire faire attention à notre automatisme de minimiser les demandes.
Ouais.
Et là, je ne parle pas de les quintupler, je parle simplement de les voir de façon réaliste. Et ce que je dirais, c'est penser, tout le monde, pensons, ça m'inclut moi aussi, pensons à comment, dans un contexte de travail, on ne sauterait jamais cette étape-là rapidement, dire non, non, je n'ai pas besoin d'informations de comment les choses vont, là, on passe à la prochaine. Au contraire, on disait, je veux tout avoir, je veux tout voir, je veux la visibilité complète de toutes les perspectives, et ensuite on ira. On bougera plus vite après, mais au début, prenons le temps d'aller bien chercher l'information. Alors, prenons le temps, nous ici, d'aller bien chercher comment ça va. Ça ne prend pas énormément de temps, mais on va être réaliste.
Et là, tu parles de nous, c'est-à-dire
Oui.
comment nous, on va personnellement. D'accord, OK.
Nous, et ça rejoint beaucoup ce qu'on entend quand on parle d'intelligence émotionnelle, par exemple. C'est quelque chose qu'on entend beaucoup dans cette conversation-là, mais qui est très important aussi. Donc, plus de conscience réaliste de comment on va. Numéro 1. Numéro 2, l'importance de prendre un peu de temps de façon stratégique. Ça n'a pas besoin d'être long, mais oui, de prendre un peu de recul pour aller voir présentement dans notre contexte, dans mon contexte, qu'est-ce que j'ai besoin. Même moi, présentement, cette semaine, je suis dans une semaine de lancement, je suis à New York, il y a beaucoup de choses. Il y a eu un plan spécifique qui s'est fait faire. Ça n'a pas pris 5 minutes pour cette semaine, pour être vraiment spécifique. Puis troisièmement, là, ça découle du plan, on veut implanter le plan. C'est pas juste d'avoir un plan et on laisse faire, mais puisqu'il va être tellement simple, ça va être facile de le faire comme toi, tu l'as observé. Alors voilà, on passe à l'action aussi. On est conscient, on est stratégique et on passe à l'action.
OK, super. Moi, ça me va. Je crois que quand j'ai refermé le livre, j'avais bien ces 3 points-là dans la tête.
Mission accomplie, alors.
Ouais, bravo en tout cas pour le livre. Vraiment un grand plaisir à lire et puis plein d'idées pour passer à l'action en sachant exactement ce qu'on fait. Je trouvais ça vraiment bien.
C'est fantastique. Merveilleux. Ben, Cédric, j'ai tout proche ici notre collègue Chester. Est-ce que tu veux que j'aille chercher Chester?
Tu peux aller chercher Chester. Avec plaisir. Ouais.
OK, alors tout le monde, pour que vous sachiez, Chester parle anglais, évidemment, puis ça va nous mener à le lancement en anglais qui va continuer à partir de l'heure. On va prendre 10 ou 15 minutes ensemble, nous trois, pour faire une transition, une discussion tous les trois, puisqu'on peut. Alors, pourquoi pas? Merci à tout le monde. Je vois Emmanuel qui s'est joint à nous, Gina qui s'est joint à nous, Sandra qui va peut-être revenir pour l'anglais, j'espère. Et tous ceux et celles que je ne vois pas nécessairement, c'est vraiment super d'avoir eu tout le monde ici avec nous. laissez-moi les voir. Je laisse tout ça ici parce que je crois que c'est mieux que si je laisse tout ouvert, mais je reviens. Je vais chercher
À tout de
Chester.
suite. À tout de suite.
Very good. So everyone's still with us, so you can just come and sit here if you'd like. So you'll get to meet. Come, wait a second. I'll turn this so we're together.
Hello.
Everyone is so on brand. I mean, Chester's brand is also on the orange side, so that's natural, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, this was not planned at all.
It just naturally occurred.
Okay.
It's perfect. Okay, so we're taking a few minutes together because I also met Chester the same way I met Cedric because of the book. That is how fantastic this overall experience has been. I've had the chance to be on Chester's podcast as well. Fabulous conversation. And when I was thinking about launching and how I'd like to launch the book, it just also appeared as a person I very much wanted to have with me. So yeah, even though the book is only in English, it was very important as a French first language person, and also the fact that we've had quite a bit of interest from the French-speaking people in France, in Quebec, and in Luxembourg, other places. So it's just been absolutely amazing. Yeah. So, but since we're the three of us here, first, hello.
Hello. Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So, Chester, maybe for this part, we'll get back to my book after and everything. But for now, tell us a bit about your work. I'll want Cedric to do the same because we didn't do a lot of it at the beginning, but now is the perfect time. So, Chester, you start.
Okay, thank you. So, my name is Chester Hilton. You can tell. I have been working with my partner, Adrian Gostick, for 24 years now in researching culture, leadership, teams, and mental health, and which comes right into the resilience plan, right? We have published 15 books together. Mm-hmm. We've sold 1.6 million copies of our books, and they're translated into 30 languages. We are constantly looking for the trends and the elements of great cultures, great teams, great leaders. We came to the lovely discovery that in every extraordinary culture leader and team that we looked at, there was a common thread for those that were exceptional, and that common thread was gratitude. Isn't that lovely? So as we look at how we make things better and more engaging and more productive, that gratitude piece always pops up. Now, one of our latest books is called Anxiety at Work. And we have 8 strategies on how to deal with anxiety and resilience. And the 8th strategy is gratitude. Do you have a gratitude practice? We also have a wonderful podcast that MH was on called Anxiety at Work. We spent a lot of time figuring out what the name of that would be. It was just the name of the book. And just in closing, the thing that we find so gratifying about our work is that with all the research we've done, 1 million engagement surveys and on, is that the principles, and this is what I love about your book, MH, the principles that you use to make great workplaces are also the building blocks for making great lives, great families, great partnerships. And so it's been a delight for us to be doing this now for 24 years.
Amazing.
I'm the proud father of 4 exceptional children, 3.5 grandchildren. We've got one on the way in July. And my wife and I celebrated 40 years of marital bliss just this last
Oh my God.
August. Yeah, there you go.
Right on. Part of your resilience.
No question. Marry well is a great resilience strategy. No question about it.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this and for being here. Cedric, talk to us.
Yeah. So I'm French. and first of all, I have been a company owner since I was 30 years old, and I still own a few companies. And I started a podcast in French language about management in 2009, which was the beginning of the podcast And it went very well. We started with my chief of operations, this podcast, and we didn't really look or care about the audience we were building. We were doing that just for fun, and also because we thought that we were learning a lot of things if we were teaching them at the same time. But suddenly we began to have calls from everywhere, from people we didn't know, and they were asking us to come and make a conference in their companies and things like that. So we looked at the statistics, and we were very, very surprised to see that it was one of the biggest audience on that subject, and it is still right now the biggest French-speaking audience on the subject of management. So I've been doing this now alone, but I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's a great opportunity for me to interview and meet bright people like Marie-Helene, for example. Of course, Chester, I would like to have you, but it's only for French speaking. Do you speak French? No.
My French is very limited to Bonne Chance and Chevrolet Coupé.
All right. So it will be a very short episode. So, and based on that activity with the podcast, what we built with the Outils du Manager team, we built a small company, and now we are proposing trainings for putting in place a management system. And so we are training people on management. And I think we have trained more than 5,000 people over the last year, and we continue. The way we do things is that we begin with the basis. We put in place the one-on-one interview, and then we build on feedback, and then on autonomy, and then on delegation, then on coaching. And the final point is company culture, because we believe that we prefer to start from the behavior to determine the culture. I don't know if I make myself clear about that. I think that the culture of a company is the experience, the experience that the people have inside the company, a bit like a customer experience. And this experience is determined by the behavior of the other employees. So I think that the culture should always be linked with the real behavior of the people. And we talk, for us, it's very important to have really this link between the culture as it is defined and as it is really in place in the company. And we see too much what we call, I don't know if you can help me here, Marie-Helene, it's une culture de papier glacé, une culture qui est sur les posters, une culture qui est sur les leaflets and everything, but which is not real in the company.
We don't walk the talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. No, that's very true. And completely agree. And of course, if given that culture does refer to how the beliefs we share in some ways in this organization, and beliefs connect with how we feel and our behaviors, all this is related and has to be aligned. And that's one of the wonderful things too, is that sometimes we work on changing. Sometimes, right, we'll try to change the culture as in, changing how we think and the beliefs we want to implement and all that. And that's one way, and we can still keep it. And sometimes we can just change behaviors, because that's also a way to change the beliefs.
Sure.
And so wherever we enter in that overall map, it's important that it, number one, is aligned, and number two, it will influence the other parts. So that's wonderful.
And I think it's a really important exercise to connect the value and the behavior, because when they are straight and aligned, then you get retention, performance, and everything you want to have as a company holder, and making people also happy at the same time.
Yes, agreed. It's been your experience as well?
Yes, I really appreciate your take on this, Cedric. We look at culture around a very simple formula, which is how do you engage, enable, and energize your people?
All right.
And I like the idea of I believe what I do matters and I make a difference. That emotional connection to work. Like you say, do your values align with the values of the company? So if I believe what I do matters, I'm making a difference. And then I always add the gratitude piece, and someone notices my effort and rewards me and says thank you. That really does reinforce that good behavior and causes you to want to do it again. So yeah, 100%. Well done.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Cedric, I know you've worked a bit, you work in general with people around the world, and I know in part some of that brought you to Canada at some point and all.
Sure.
And being in France and seeing sometimes a lot of the literature, English literature coming from, say, the US and Canada and all this, any of your, does it look like things, just to you, it's not like, a doctoral degree on the topic, but just your impression on country differences, cultures of countries?
I think, in France there is as everyone knows, French don't like managers. They don't like to be told what they have to do. They don't like the authority, etc., etc. And I think this is one of the major points. That's one of the things which may be difficult for a manager to make his work. In France, in a company there are three kinds of power. You have the hierarchy. You have the power of competence. I am more experienced than you, so you have to obey me. And you have the influence, which is, I think, the power you should use when you are in charge. And it can be a positive influence, of course. But in France, it's very hard to make people understand that they could be managed by someone who knows less than them about what they are doing. That's one of the first things you have to explain and explain and explain. And people will look at you in a strange way if you say that your power as a manager is a power of influence. They will always try to use the two first forms of power. And I think this is our job to transform this. Yeah. So this is one of the major differences. And I think it's much less of an obstacle in the other countries.
It can be, that's a great observation. I think that I've seen this as well, so I can relate to what you're saying. And to some degree, I think especially professional services firms probably behave like the French. Regardless of where they are. There's a bit of that mentality. In a few minutes, your comments on this, and then we'll start together. But your thoughts?
Cedric, it's so interesting because, whenever we do international work with an organization that has, offices in Asia and Europe and so on, France is always the exception. They always say, and then there's...
And not always in a good way.
Yeah. And I would submit as well, we have your three areas of influence. I think in France, too, the government has a huge influence on how you can do business and so on with the legislation, and that is less in some countries. In China, government actually rules everything, right? Here in the United States, there's a big pushback about any kind of government oversight, and yet in France, there's very much that blend. How you can hire, holidays and so on. And
that's true.
That is another big piece of influence. So it's always interesting for me to talk to French business leaders because I want to see, is it true what I've been hearing from all these multinational countries that France is always a bit of the exception. And
it's true.
Like you say, in a very good way as far as work-life balance. you can't browbeat your employees in France as you can in other countries, which I think
It's
is a very
true.
positive thing. Yeah.
It has positive.
And what is very surprising is that the productivity in France is quite good, and it's surprising when But honestly, I think it is changing, and I think work cultures are converging a lot. I hope in a good way, and I think there is less and less difference. That's what I have been observing in the last 5-10 years, something like that.
Yeah. But your point is a good one. The measure of success is productivity.
Mm-mm.
And you don't have to work 18-hour days for 6 weeks in a row. In fact, more and more studies are showing that at a certain point, not only are you not productive after so much stress,
Sure.
you're actually detrimental. It actually takes away. So who would think, that we would learn such valuable lessons from the French?
Well, and on that beautiful note, Cédric, thank you, merci, thank you so much for having joined me. It's been an absolute pleasure. It always is. I might have to write another book so we can do this again.
Maybe in French this time.
Yes, that's right.
Pleasure to meet you, my friend.
And pleasure to have met you, Chester. Bye-bye.
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 Have a good show. Bye.
Thanks. Okay, wait a second. Cédric will leave us, and then we're here. Just
you
like
and
that.
me.
It's us. Yes.
C'est bon.
C'est bon. Well, now we're in English officially. And so I'll just say hello, everyone. If anyone is joining and you want to say hi in the chat, that will be relayed to us. Gina, hi. Sandra. I know Emmanuel joined us for the French. Perhaps you're still there. It's so wonderful to have everyone. And if you're just joining, everyone, Chester Elton.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Oh,
I so enjoyed your book, and I know now we get to dig deep as to, and I so appreciated the way you started your book with that personal story of you crossing the river, and it leads me to my first question about, people think resilience is just toughing it out, suck it up, rub some dirt on it, push through. Why is that not your take on resilience? Because in your story of your hike, you actually quit and turned around, right?
That's right.
Is that a sign of resilience, to knowing when to quit?
Well, yes, I would say it is one. Yes, it is one of them. And but it's definitely not about just toughing it out, because the toughing it out, well, you've tried it. I'm assuming you've tried it.
Absolutely.
Most of us have tried it. It doesn't work. Okay, so we've been there, and it just puts us at risk, basically. And it's not to say that, of course, at times, many times, we want to be persistent, we want to keep going, we do want to, in some ways, tough it out, but not out of a sort of an unconscious keeping going, putting your head down for no logic. What we want is deliberately thinking about our plan, and there will be moments where we want to persist, but there will be moments where, we need to not do that.
Well, and the point you make about, that kind of toughing it out puts you in danger.
Yes.
That's exactly what happened to you in the river. You said, well, my husband could come help me. I'm good. I don't need your help. I can do this on my own. And it almost cost you your life.
Yeah, and his, for that matter.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. So good lesson there.
Yeah. So the lesson is, right, or one of the lessons that I took away is, as leaders in particular, we don't think we need help, right? We are the givers, not the receivers.
Yep.
And so the lesson there was, when it gets hard, don't be afraid to ask for help. Did I get that right?
That's one. Yes. And even for that river situation, that analogy, it applies there too, but in general as well, let's proactively, before the next thing happens, because there will be next things, obviously. That's in part why we love what we do. We love the unexpected, bring on the challenge. Let me figure out the new puzzle. However you name this thing, you enjoy the next river. You enjoy the next summit. You enjoy that next challenge. Therefore, can we prepare now in a proactive way, right?
And you talk about being strategic.
Yes.
Often we think, well, it sort of happens. I react. I prepared for this. I can push through. I'll be great. It's only impossible until somebody does it. That's going to be me, right? So talk to me about this strategy, because this applies to so many parts in our life, right? You have to be strategic about your personal life. You have to be strategic about relationships, right? Mm-hmm. So you say, I've got to be strategic about resilience. What's step one in your strategy.
Yes. Well, and I'll step back for a quick second to tell you how I got to even this, perhaps, because the analogy I was following is what we do in business. Right? So in business, I was sharing this with Cedric, but it applies right now in this conversation because it's all about the book.
But by the way, available at fine bookstores everywhere.
Yeah.
Anybody can buy one copy. Buy two, one for you and one for a friend.
Yes, the next graduate person, the next person that graduates. Yeah, this is good.
Birthdays, anniversaries, bar mitzvahs. It's always appropriate.
It will be appropriate for real. Yes, It will be. But the thing is, we want to be. The way I got to this idea of being strategic about our resilience is I work a lot with professionals, leaders, many of whom have done strategic planning in other contexts, governance, senior management, senior leadership, whatever. And then I would say, okay, when you have that great idea over here, do you just have a great idea and run with it? No, you do not. You have a great idea, and then you look at who else is doing anything close to this? How are they doing it? How much are they charging? Who is buying it? What forces might impact it? You're doing this whole thinking over here. You're being strategic.
Right.
Same here. And so therefore, back to your question about, so what's the first step? What do we do? We start by, well, we can start from different entry doors, but one entry door is to look at what are your values? Most of us have done some thinking around this, not the first time. List them, have that in front of you so that you can in some way take a bit of a step back, a distance, and have that clarity. This is a 5-minute exercise. Could be longer if you feel like reflecting longer. But if you've recently done this work with whatever, your coach, your workplace, your journaling, whatever, you know yourself, write it down. That is the first, because just like in any company here, you'll be aligned with your values, not the 25 things you care about, your key values. Same here. What are your key values? That would be the first, because you will want your strategic plan, just like any other, to be very specific, in this case, to you. And that's where you start.
And why would you say it's so important to do that now, probably more than ever?
Probably was good before, but I didn't think of it until now. So, but now more than ever, I would say, because we are facing, a lot of us, professionals, leaders, different contexts we're facing even more demands.
Yeah.
Many of those demands we welcome. That's fabulous. Some of them we may not. Some of them we don't have a choice. Hello, pandemic. Hello, AI that's coming in our personal and professional lives. All kinds of demands that are coming. So it's as if, in a way, we're now doing our sport, if I can call it that, in a much more intense way. So if we were to start doing any sport with a bit more intensity, again, we would not just say, okay, I'm going to now start running 1 hour a day every day. You would get the right shoes. Right. Make sure you're maybe training with someone, doing the stretches, going gradually. You would have that strategic plan. So the demands are higher. We need to be strategic.
Yeah, and you look at all the numbers, and so do I, that burnout is at an all-time high. And so define burnout for me.
Yes.
Oops, sorry.
I'm
making notes and writing on MH's hands at the same time.
Yeah. Well, here, everyone, I have to tell you, what's fabulous here is I'm in New York this week. Chester is based in New Jersey, and he came in person. So that's why we're here together on that screen together. But oh my God, so exciting. So sorry, with all this, I lost my. What's the question?
Burnout.
Yes.
How do you define burnout, and how does resiliency play a part in it? Because again, you can say, I am so resilient, I can always do more, and yet we know burnout is at an all-time high. So what is your definition of burnout?
Yes. So complex equation, all this, even the links between burnout and resilience, I'll express some ideas around all this. But burnout actually does have a definition from the World Health Organization. Okay. It exists, there is a definition. 3 criteria. So number 1, we're exhausted. Number 2, we are cynical. Don't think, no hope that anything's going to change. Number 3, it is impacting our performance. Okay. Now, few things to think about burnout. It does not happen instantly. It builds over time. Other things in the psychological realm sometimes will build very fast. This one doesn't, which means opportunity if we listen. But we tend to not listen to the signs, put our head down, say, it's nothing, it's not a big deal, let me carry on. And so that sometimes means that we miss these signs. But that's the definition.
Well, and it impacts your health, right? I
It
mean,
can.
World Health Organization, if it gives a definition, and how does it impact your health?
Yeah, it can. So if we start at the beginning, it may not initially. Initially, it could be just these signs, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm feeling it. If you're taking immediate action, if you're working with your executive coach and you catch it really fast and all this, you could get yourself out of there. You don't need to go to the bottom. But if we don't, which most of us, we keep going, then different things can happen. On the physical health side, you could see higher blood pressure, problem with your heart, different things. On the psychological side, you can see problems like depression, anxiety, often a combination of both. And of course, you get to a point where whether it's your physical health, your mental health, or both of them, where your health is just not going to be enough that you can sort of will yourself to be at work or just make yourself keep going. So you could wait until you get there, or you could listen to the signs earlier. And sometimes we just have to burn ourselves a bit before we learn, right?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things here I think are really interesting. You say, you've got a coach, you catch the signs early. How important is it for you to have, I call them accountability partners. How important is it that you have somebody that you can talk to, that you can be vulnerable, that you can reach out to? Because again, we're going to have a lot of leaders on this call that are going, yeah, I get that. That's really good for other people.
Yes.
For me, I'm good. So this idea of listening, asking for help, how do you find that accountability partner?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would say, I would love to just tell you, oh, you could work with a partner or just stay, do it on your own, that kind of thing. Having worked with professionals and leaders enough, and even see myself too, you probably need to have one, because our tendency to be positively biased, to disregard the sign, minimize them, which again, I was talking to Cedric about this, extremely helpful. That's what makes us entrepreneurs who will push barriers and go regardless. And we're doing this. So it's fabulous in many ways. And we need to be aware of it so that we don't not see the reality. And that's what a person, it could be a peer, someone that we're checking in with on a regular basis. It could be a mentor. It could be, yes, an executive coach. It could be a psychologist you check in with once a quarter or as needed. It could be a friend. It is useful to have a bit of that formal structure, not just, I have good friends, I'll talk to them if I need them. Right. You need someone that pokes.
Yeah, interesting. I would have to say in my career, it was always been my wife, who finally would just say, when I get to that point, look, you got to do something different. I want my wife, I want my husband back.
Yes.
So what are the biggest barriers in business? You talk about pushing barriers and pushing limits when it comes to being resilient and mental health. What are the biggest barriers that you're seeing in most organizations that prevent us from developing a good strategy around resilience and keeping ourselves healthy and happy and wise and productive? It's always about productivity, right?
All a combination. Often, if we could have all this, we'll be actually very thrilled, very happy. Okay, so it varies, of course, from teams to organization as well. One is a culture that we're talking about this a moment ago, but a team culture, if it's a large organization, different teams will have different subcultures, right? So sometimes there's in that context a specific culture but sometimes it's the country, sometimes it's the field we're in, where in healthcare, for example, I'm the doctor, I'm not the patient. It comes in different shapes and forms, some of which have been there from the moment you started your training. So it's very ingrained. It now is a belief that you don't even realize you have. But the culture is often a key thing, and that's why it's such a great place to start to shift things. There's also just the personal beliefs, because just like you've learned a certain industry culture, a culture in your field from the first moment you started training, or even when you announced when you were 9 that you were going to be a physician. But same things in our personal lives, right? The beliefs we develop earlier in life, seeing adults around us interact with each other and with us, will generate beliefs that are here, which at times have been helpful for a while, And eventually, context changes,
Yeah.
not so helpful.
Are you seeing generational differences when it comes to resilience and finding these partners? You know, I'm the tail end of the baby boomers, right? And my generation is, look, just suck it up. You know, just rub some dirt on it, get back in the game. I came across a great quote that you might like, where he says, because we'd say, look, you're stressed, just calm down. Just calm down, take a breath. Right?
Yes.
And there's a great quote that says, never in the history of calming down has anybody actually calmed down by being told to calm down. You know, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you bring up a great point around culture and individuals. So I'm a team leader, and we did talk about generational differences, right? So I've got seasoned professionals, I've got, you know, younger generations, maybe I've got differences in where they grew up. I've got some Europeans, I've got South Americans, I've got Asians on my team. How do I, as a team leader, how do I create that safe environment? And again, I if you can, talk a little bit about generational differences. That seems to be coming up more and more. Millennials, Gen Z or Gen Z, as we would say in Canada, and the Alpha generation. How do we get older cultures and younger cultures talking to each other in a way that's meaningful?
I know.
There were a lot of
Big
questions in there.
I know.
Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I love it. I do. So, well, you know, one thing that came to mind, just the tail end of what you were talking about, in some ways that reminds me of something a lot of us have experienced in large organizations, where eventually there are cultural differences between the sales team and the operations team.
Right.
Where, you know, the sales team is going out selling things that can't possibly be built in that time, where with that level of quality, and then then it creates this tension. And part of what helps us get together moving forward is understanding each other's position, beliefs, and seeing the ways in which we're more similar than different. So that, the sales team does want us to win so that we can operationally produce even more. And operations, making sure the quality is there and push us back on timeline to make sure we do have that wonderful quality you can sell. And so in some ways, between generations, it functions the same way. We want to understand each generation's values and where they're coming from. In this case, keeping in mind that it's not because you're in that generation that everyone thinks the same way, obviously. Right. So there's still the individual differences we want to honor. And often it's that conversation about bringing to the table the values that each generation brings. How wonderful it's been to see the newer generations come to the workplace and say, I'm going to make sure I take care of my health.
Right.
For other generations that it was not even a word, right?
Right.
So so it's helping each other see where we're coming from, keeping an eye, the psychologist in me wanting to say this, but it's true, keeping an eye for the individual differences as well, because often there will be more similarities than differences, and our different ways of thinking will support each other.
So if I heard you correctly, communication is a huge part of this.
It is a huge part, yes.
And what I took away from what you just said is understand how people want to be communicated to, and understand their story, right? I think you make a great point. Often we say, oh, that's a millennial thing, or that's a baby boomer thing, when there are individual differences. Clearly, there are lots of, millennials that act like baby boomers and vice versa. Yeah. So you up that communication, you understand their stories. Well, what are some strategies you've seen from leaders on that communication piece that makes it safe? Any tips there?
Oh, a number, and some of that I talk about in the book, but one that actually connects with what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Increasing the sense of community. Like even right now, because I want to say hello to a couple of people who are here.
Excellent.
I have to say this because it is part of my community. I see, so AJ Harper is the developmental editor I worked with to write my book. Could not have happened without her. AJ, yes.
An accountability partner.
Well, and then see, Kara Poppet is part of the group that worked with me, accountability partner as well. Some people I'm connected with on LinkedIn. We have not spoken necessarily before, but we're connected. So hi to Evelyn and Laura, and of course Sandra Routledge I've known for decades. And so so I wanted to say hi to all of you and thank you for being here. And going back to your question, that's one of them. So we're the leader here, and we know actually from research that the degree to which the sense of community exists within the team will act as a protective factor for burnout. We actually have research that shows this. And sometimes we'll contribute to this organically and invite and, share some of our own, at times, challenges. That piece about being vulnerable in some ways, yes, it is a thing also. There's more research on that I could share. But the point is creating at times formal structures to create community. Like it's almost as if for me, I wrote this book and now I find myself in conversations like this with reconnecting with some people and connecting with more. And I'm benefiting so much from this community. In our teams, same thing. We can let it go and nourish it naturally. We can also make formal moments where this is what we're doing.
Yeah. It is interesting. Back to your experience in the river with your husband, you said, "Look, the river wasn't the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The river's a river. It's being a river.
It happens.
The problem is us." So often we look at things and we say, "That's the problem," and we deflect. Whereas you're saying, look inwardly first. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Yeah.
or both at least, full context.
Right.
Because we're quick to, and we've been told in our defense, it's not like all that we're sort of delusional about being naturally resilient. The reality is that we have gone through a lot.
Yeah.
We've made it.
Yeah.
We've managed. We've taken it. We've persisted. We've have shown resilience in a number of ways before. So it's true. It's there.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because it was a personality trait.
Right.
It was in part because we had built, sometimes without realizing it, protective factors that allowed us to do this.
Yeah.
And so, need to invest.
Excellent. I know there's a little one up in the corner there, but here's the bigger version. It's the resilience plan. Make sure you put it on your list. It's not overwhelming, which I really appreciated. Lots of takeaways and even downloadable exercises you can do. So the resilience plan, as we mentioned, a great gift for yourself and your thousands of friends. You talked briefly about AI.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's causing a lot of anxiety and so on. But let's shift to EI, emotional intelligence. You talk about that in your book. What role does emotional intelligence play in helping people be more resilient in the workplace and be a part of their strategy?
Yes. Many. The more, as we're investing in one and the other is going to help each other. The link between the two that I often talk about, and many of my good colleagues also do work in this area, but is that first step of increasing our deliberate attention to how we're doing. And what we were saying with Cedric, and I'll say it here too, because it possibly is, if I had to pick one thing, that may have to be this one, because if I say increasing your self-awareness, checking in with yourself, most professionals and leaders are nodding and saying, okay, on to the next thing. I'm doing that already. And I'm going to say, no, stay right there. Because in that question, what most professionals and leaders see is, I'm fine, meaning, because it's almost like, and there's a chapter that I call that, they assume that either they're a rock or a wreck. And most of the time, they're a rock. And therefore, they don't need to do anything about it. And so they feel like they're a rock until they're down here, a wreck. And that happens not because we're actual rocks or wrecks for that matter. That happens because we disregard all the signs here. And so if we wanted to increase our emotional intelligence, which allows then us to manage how we respond to everything, that self-awareness is required. And the main trap that I see my professionals and leaders fall into is to just assume they're fine. Stay there. You're still fine. I'm not saying that now we want you to tell yourself you're not. All we're wanting is to say, I am fine and dealing with these 20 demands here. Instead of, I'm fine, I've got no demands, I'm good. No, you're not. So let's make sure we make sure we are realistic there.
Yeah, my dad had a huge influence on me, and he had a wonderful saying that was, be good to everybody, everybody's having a tough day. Mm-hmm. So kind of the opposite of what you just said here, we tend to want to assume everybody's fine. You're probably better off assuming that there's probably something going on. We all have something. If you have kids, you always have something going on. And when they get older, it's even more because now they've got families of their own. Such sage advice. You've got a chapter, and I want to jump into it, the supply, demands, and you. which I think is such a great chapter title,
Mm.
you know, because particularly for top achievers, right? They never say no. And so you can't give them too much work. I always laugh with, we'll talk to teams and say, how many of you have a rock star in your team? And they'll all raise their hand. I say, and when times get really demanding, what do you do with those rock stars? You load them up because they never say no. So there is a limited supply and demand, right? We can't stay awake, although some healthcare professionals do that, right? The 72-hour shifts, which are just ridiculous. How do you manage that supply and demand to make sure that you don't end up, you know, burned out and wanting to quit, or, you know, all that horrible stuff that does happen when you just let work get away from you? Right?
Yes. And it will depend person to person. But the step that helps everyone shift to what they need to do next, and in my experience with this book and the workshops leading to it, is to literally just do that. The 2 columns, you're listing all your demands right now. You're listing all your sources of supply, realistic and actual. Because here's the thing. Sometimes I'll ask someone, oh, so what do you do that brings energy back? Oh, I like to go for long walks, like, you know, 1-hour walks, fairly fast, all that kind of thing. Great, that sounds great. In the last 2 weeks, how many times did you go? Well, the last 2 weeks were particularly busy, so didn't happen there, but in general, I'm like, so it doesn't go on the list. So it's being realistic about these lists, because then you can make decisions that will make sense. And if we all want to bring this to our teams, it's bringing it to these conversations, sharing what you may be working on, right? So for example, as that leader who tends to say yes to things, disregard your supply and demand, you might come in and say, you know, I've started doing this thing where more realistically, I check in with myself on the actual demands and supply I've got, and what I need to do about this. Like me, this week, I'm here in New York. Right. New York's fabulous. And there are things to do here.
Lots of things to do.
And I've had fabulous invitations. One was last night where I had a wonderful opportunity to see a play, and there was an event after. I went back after, not because I didn't want to see that wonderful social event after, but because in the realm of all the demands I have this week, all exciting in this case, they're actually all positive, including being here with Chester. But it was a choice I had to make.
I appreciate your saying, as a leader, you need to model those good behaviors and say, hey, look, I know it's been really rough. I need to take a break. Who else needs to take a break? You know, because I think once the leader does it, it gives people permission to do it.
Oh, it does. It does. I would say, no, just last week, actually, I was speaking with one of my executive coaching clients who we probably worked on this for a while, for her to get to a point where she would actually say to a team member, I am leaving. It's whatever the time was, the end of the day. I'm leaving, and not even pretending it's like a key appointment or whatever. Right. To go to my exercise class.
There you go.
And so she said it, almost like probably stopped breathing or whatever. But then the person who was with her in her office, who had come in to share a fairly large challenge, and all said, oh, that is so amazing. That means what you've been telling me to do, I can actually do. And now I trust it because you're telling me this.
You know, isn't it so funny? As leaders, we disregard that so quickly. You know, we'll send out emails on the weekend and say, but don't worry about it till Monday. Well, they're worrying about it now. And say, you don't have to work on the weekends, but I will. And then, of course, as an employee, I go, well, if I want to be heard, then I better work on the weekends. Excellent. You have a bit in your book here that I just love, and I want to go to it. There's a great quote. It says, when it comes to your resiliency, I'm going to hold it up so you can again see the cover of the book. When it comes to your resilience, tipping too far toward optimism can become a liability. Now, don't we all want to be optimistic? Don't we always want to say there's a brighter day? Why is optimism a liability and not a strength?
It is, I would say both, obviously, because there are many aspects of, well, we do know from research that optimism is a personality trait, and whoever is a bit higher on optimism, it has been correlated with a tendency to have higher resilience in general. Resilience is not a personality trait, but it does feed it. Right. So it is related in that sense and positive. However, the way that professionals and leaders think about their optimism, it becomes a way for them to think that they can disregard the amount of demands, the impact of these demands on them, on their health. And it almost feels like they can override their health. Like they can override the amount of resilience they have, the energy they have, how healthy they are now getting or not. It's as if they can decide this, because we're deciding. We like to decide. But there's a limit to this. And that's where we're going to put ourselves at risk. And that's that. So it's not overall a problem. It's pushed at the limit here. Then it becomes a problem.
You know, when I read that part of your book, an experience came back to me. I read about prisoners of war. And it was really interesting. They said, who were the ones that actually survived? And it wasn't the optimists, because the optimists would say, we'll be home by Christmas. We'll be home by, you know, whatever. And then when that didn't happen, they went into a deep depression and would give up. So I so appreciate you saying, look, it's good to be optimistic. You know, I mean, people like to be around optimistic people. The fact is if you are overly optimistic and disregard the data and the information,
That's right.
it can tilt towards.
That's right.
That is such great advice. And there's all kinds of great advice in this great book that you should be getting. You know, we sort of jumped over this. We probably should have started the conversation this way, but so what was the inspiration for you to actually write this book? We talk about the timing now, everybody being overwhelmed, but you got together with your publisher and you had all these ideas, and then you came to the conclusion that, I'm going to write it now. So what was the inspiration?
Yes. Well, some of that inspiration is colleagues, friends, people I've worked with. I'm going to say hi to Meredith and Sean, who have joined us as well. Thank you for saying hello, and everybody else who are with us. The inspiration for it was seeing the benefits of the shifts, the proactive shifts, and how much we were saving burnouts and just not feeling well by implementing this work. And then there's only so many people I can talk to, audiences or in person. And then I thought, and actually some people I worked with telling me, MH, so glad I've got this. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. I so wish I had this 15 years ago. And so hearing this again, then, so it is through hearing this more than once, a few times, that at some point I sort of thought, I'm talking about being proactive. That could be a way to do this, and to maintain the message, because I am a book person. I love my books, and I reread a number of the books I love the most. Sometimes not a long part, but just a little bit that just brings me back. I love bookstores. I love the book, the overall thing. And so all this together, and then also the timing, because it is, as AJ, who's with us, I've thanked her earlier, AJ Harper. She knows how I very much thought about when I would do it. I didn't just jump in. I knew the commitment, the time that it would need, and all this. And it's more time than I thought.
Yeah, it's a bit. It's harder to write a book than most people. Understand.
Anyone who wants to write one, do it. Talk to me. I'll tell you more. Or to AJ.
So you're using it as an amplifier for your message. You can reach more people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Earlier, ideally, because it's, and I was visiting UBC Bookstore, University of British Columbia. I teach executive education.
Go Thunderbirds.
And oh my God, look at you. That's true.
My first year at university was UBC.
Exactly. How amazing is this, right? We found each other. But that book's going to be there. And we already have things in the plans for the student wellness, that kind of thing. So that ideally, yes, how amazing. I wish I had this kind of advice early in my career. So hopefully I would have listened. But at least I would have read it. I think I would have read it. Yes.
And I think, too, this amplification of your message through your book and your speaking and your teaching, are you hoping to sort of destigmatize, and maybe stigmatize isn't quite the right word, this idea that resilience is becoming just another buzzword, like another flavor of the week? How do you know, often we'll take something and we'll rename it because it becomes too trite. Resilience is becoming such a common topic, and people interpret it different ways. How do you keep it from becoming just a buzzword and something that really people need to address and can implement?
I know. That's it. I mean, the amount of thinking in like choosing that particular word.
Putting it in the title of your book, right? I mean, we use it because we know that people know it resilience
Yeah.
is sort of a thing, but
Yeah.
how do you keep it from becoming just
I know.
trite?
I know. So I think that through creating, through, in this case, hopefully, going through the book, the exercises, the creating the plan. Cedric was funny. He had actually done all the exercises. And you get to seeing the impact. And once the impact is there, it almost doesn't matter how you call it. Call it your superpower if you want to, or whatever. It's still going, it is going to be a game changer. Oh, that's a word a lot of people have used with doing these things. And so then it takes the meaning you need it to call it whatever you want. The choice of this word in this case was a bit academic, just because it is the right word for exactly what I'm talking about. And so there's part of me that's still a bit like that. And I think there's been a moment where we were not talking about resilience. Then we were talking about it. Then it became possibly, I don't want to hear about it because you're putting all the responsibility on me, and that's not fair.
Or me as the team manager, I'm responsible for everybody's resilience. Yeah.
And then I think we have, either we're there now or we're getting there soon, back to, here is the definition. This is what this is. It holds immense opportunity for all of us if we harness its power.
Yeah, and I think your idea of saying, hey, understand what all that is. What's your plan?
Yes.
What's your plan? And, we talked about sort of step one, but if you were to give people just the overview, not everything, because we want you to buy the book, what would be a couple of tips in starting the plan?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very happy to talk about this, because the most important thing is for as many people as possible to take that proactive responsibility, I would say. And so you figure out your values, you get even more clarity on your sources of supply and demand. And there could be other steps, of course. What I've done in the book is, in some ways, distilled, based on my experience, what we know from research and the work I've done, what tends to get people there as quickly as possible. AJ would love this. What does my reader need to go from point A to point B? That really was I focused on. So the values, the supply and demand, the overall context, we're literally doing a bit of a SWOT analysis for us as individuals, looking at our internal strengths and areas of challenge, external strengths and areas of challenge in our current context, and then creating a plan, just like we would in a business type of context, where we'd have our goal, let's say increase my resilience, and then say 3 strategic pillars, for example, with very concrete actions under each. This is what you're doing. But you can really only get to creating your strategic plan with the 3 pillars once you've done this particular work of increasing your visibility on all of these aspects of your particular context right now.
Yeah, so I've got my individual plan, and I've got my pillars, and I'm doing the exercises, which is great. How do you then implement that on a broader basis? You're talking to big organizations. Is that harder to move? Is that easier to move? I mean, because you're dealing with more people and maybe a little more skepticism. So what are your tips for people that say, okay, I can do this for myself. How do I do it for my team? And then how do I get my company to buy into it?
Yes. So there, now we're moving into being strategic at the team and the organizational level. And that strategy needs to be worked on by either the leader here, usually it will be the leader even of a team, along with their HR partner in a large organization. And in large organizations, they have a mental health strategy.
Right.
Whether you know they do or not, it's better if you do, but they have one.
They've got a number you can call. Yeah.
There is an HR partner somewhere who knows what's going on, and there is an employee and family assistance program. Where I'm going with this is that, I mean, it's a broad question with lots of parts to answer to this, but the point is, if we're wanting to bring this perspective in our teams and organizations, and we're in a large corporation, I would say what your next step is to connect with your human resources partner, learn from them what is the strategy here, or if you already know a bit, what is the next tactics you're working on? What are the next areas of focus for the next quarter or the next year?
Okay.
And then align your own actions at your team level or whatever level you're at with what the next actions based on the strategy are for the organization. Even if perhaps you wanted other things, I would say it probably will help anyway. And You'll get more traction if you align internally with that strategy that already has approvals, traction, resources. And that's probably your best investment at this point.
And would you say that's the best way to convince naysayers? Because you talk about, look, the benefit is productivity. It's lower turnover. It's more engaged employees. It's more innovation. So is that what you do to convince the naysayers? Say, look, let's go to the data. Let's go to the facts.
Yeah. Looking at the data is often a good example. What we're lucky to have now is on the planet, certainly in Canada, in the US as well, and in Europe as well, we do have numbers.
Right.
So they exist. We can demonstrate the benefits of investing, and more, especially large corporations, they are investing in integrated strategies. So you've got mental, physical, financial health, all integrated together. Because as you do this, and we have research that shows the impact on all of these things on each other, you are, in fact, increasing the health and therefore performance, but also happiness of everyone.
Yeah. And talk to me about the ripple effect. Obviously, your book is focused on optimizing your work performance and mental health, but what about your personal life? I mean, obviously it has to have a positive impact there, right?
It's everywhere. My entry door was the work part, because I wrote this book very much for professionals and leaders. It is something that many of my advanced readers says, I shared it with my partner,
right?
And they really benefited from it. So it goes broader, but it was a door that allowed me to get to that audience better. That's why the book is in the business sections in bookstores, because that's the angle that if I had gone broader for the conversation, none of these people would have listened.
Isn't that interesting? The workplace is the entry. I want to do a time check. We're supposed to end at.
We can end whenever we want. It's between now and the hour. So,
okay, great.
So we've done a good part. Whatever we follow the natural flow, Chester.
Well, no, it was. I had it in my head that we were supposed to finish at 45 to the hour, and I thought, well, we better start wrapping things up.
That's perfect. Yeah.
I do love your take on better work, better life. A lot of talk about work-life balance, and then you've got people that say, look, if you want to be really good at work, your life has to be out of balance, and on and on and on. You shared a quick story. I shared this with my partner. And so do you have some stories about work you've done where people have come up and said, look, I was ready to quit. I was ready to phone it in. After I talked to you and I put this plan in place, it made all the difference.
Yes.
Tell me your favorite story.
Well, and now, is there one specific you read in the book that you like that you're sort of wanting me to say? Because I got many, and so I may not pick the right
my
one.
favorite story is probably not your favorite story, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I'm working right now with a fabulous professional and leader in a very high performance organization, and that's exactly what happened there. So she is magnificent, really. If I told you more, you'd be like, oh my God. So magnificent. However, they're probably receiving more demands than can be actually handled by the resources that they have right now. But they've been in the mode of serving and performing and delivering and all these things. And very much starting from an approach, a way of thinking that's along the lines of, I cannot not be there. I am the backup person. If anyone is sick and I'm also sick, I still need to be there and keep doing the work and all these things. Or I have to be in all these meetings. I have to. There are a lot of I have to, and not out of anything other than sometimes if I don't do it, no one else will.
Right.
And through this work, there was a shift to absolutely recognizing the importance of all these things. So none of that level of importance has changed. But what we've done is almost think of it the same way an ethics board would consider a challenging situation.
Mm-hmm.
So if a challenging situation is coming to an ethics board, all this, the parties in this situation are all important. The decision is necessary to go in everyone's way, and it can't. And part of what we have to do is say, in this overall decision-making process, which of the various parties or areas that will we prioritize, and then we'll align the rest. You have to make that kind of decision at some point. In this case, it's your health.
Right.
And so shifting to this then allowed this particular person, for example, to say, okay, I'm required in this meeting. I will only go for the first 10 minutes and tell them I'm only here for 10. So if we can deal with whatever I'm needed for, this is what we're doing. And then creating other structures that allowed her to stay magnificent, but not go from rock to wreck.
From rock to wreck.
Yeah.
What are some of the red flags that we should be looking for ourselves and for people on our teams? Because, as we've talked, high performers in particular, I think are very good at hiding, their issues with mental health and so on. So what are some of the red flags? You talk about it in your book, that if that starts to happen, you kind of go, oh, that's a clue that maybe we need a little bit of an intervention, or we need to offer some help.
Yes. Well, and I love that question. Thank you for asking it, because we will see signs, but sometimes we don't know what to do or how to recognize whatever. And the first thing I would say is, we may see these signs. We don't want to assume that they are an indicator.
Right.
Because it could be something else. Sometimes
Sure.
they look like they're a sign of early burnout, lower resilience. It could also be a thyroid gland not functioning the way they should. It could be personal things happening at home that we don't know. It could be so many things. And so the overall direction, I would say, is we do want to just share our observations and offer to have a conversation. So it could look as simple as, Chester, and then you name your observation, back to what signs.
Right.
Usually when we connect on Zoom, you turn on your camera, you're talking, you're smiling, you're talking. And the last few times, just keep your camera off, you don't talk. You okay? Would you like to talk? And then if he says no, then you say, well, if it changes, let me know. Leave it there. But if you say, sure, let's talk, then my next step will be to find that moment where we're going to talk and mostly listen to you and remind you to check in with resources. And it could be as simple as this. You won't know for sure. And the signs are the same as we would see for us. So sometimes it's just not being their usual self, like the example I gave. It could be the other signs we talked about, like being more frustrated, impatient, difficulty concentrating, difficulty making decisions, things like that. But keeping in mind, we won't know. However, just the fact of asking, it brings us nicely back to culture.
Yeah.
You never know. You may say, no, I'm not. I don't need to talk to you. Okay. But I will never know. Maybe that will make you decide to talk to Adrian. Right. Or it will make you decide to talk to Cindy. And I've conveyed that in this culture, we check in with each other, we care, and we can talk. And yeah.
How about this approach? How about if I come up and I say, hey, Sandra, I read this book, The Resilience Plan, and you're burned out, aren't you? How about that approach? Has that ever worked for you?
Where are you going with this, Chester?
Well, what I find is that I think these tips are really important, because if you confront people head on, I think most people will pull back even further. Mm. No, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. You should worry about a lot of people. I'm not one of them. Yeah. Whereas your approach is, hey, normally I've noticed that normally you are so engaged and you're not. Is there anything I can do to help you with that? Yeah. I think that's such a gentle and kind way to address it, as opposed to, you're burned out, aren't you?
Well, and now you say, on the one hand, yes, I agree, absolutely. At the same time, there will be that. I'm talking probably like one or two people close to us. I bet you could go to Adrian and say exactly that. Like someone you've told us how, you've worked with this person for a couple of decades. Yeah. Sometimes you get to a point in, levels of closeness as peers in a certain industry or in the work you do or whatever, where you can actually say that.
Yeah, there's that moment when, subtlety isn't going to work.
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes, but for most people, that's true. It's always time to increase the intensity. You can always start on the gentler side and increase if you need to.
Right. Yeah. Well, why does this matter to you so much? I mean, you're so passionate about this book and this project. Why? I mean, there's a lot of things you could be passionate about, saving the whales, whatever, right? Why this?
I've always been passionate about this, I would say. Yeah. And overall, the direction of just the opportunity it represents to save time and pain, if you are proactive. But maybe one last story, but my early career, so I'm from Quebec City. My husband, Nick, is in mining. So early in our life together, we're still together.
Good.
We moved up north in the province of Quebec, a mining town, small mining town, all that. I know it was early career. And in that region, I ended up doing lots of things because I was like one of two psychologists and getting supervision from the city and all these things. A lot of people I ended up working with were individuals consulting their employee and family assistance program, and I was part of all of them. And a lot of these employees were from mining.
Right.
And so these individuals would come in, they would never have like taken all the steps to find a psychologist somewhere, but this was an easy resource, free, confidential, covered, sure. I, have a challenge with whatever, my partner, my child, whatever, myself, and they would just come in. And then we could have that very straightforward conversation. I would share what we know from research, best practice, things to try this, come back, and then seeing how quickly, especially because often it was proactive, how quickly things changed. I mean, I already loved that part of my work, but seeing this just made it even more. And so it's the saving of time and pain.
Well, and once you have a little bit of success,
it's encouraging.
And then they talk to their friends, and these big tough miners all of a sudden say, this is okay, right?
Exactly.
So funny, having grown up in Vancouver, whenever anybody says Quebec City, I automatically think of the Quebec Nordique and the Patrick Roy. Okay. Now, if you're a hockey fan, you know what that means. If you're not, don't worry. It's a very much a Canadian thing.
Yes.
Is there anything we've missed? I know we're coming up on our time here, but I don't want to leave anything on the table. I loved reading the book. I love the quotes and so on. We've talked about a lot of stuff. Have we missed any part of the book that you wanted to talk about that you think is important that we should? As we come into the home stretch.
We've done home stretch. We've done a really good, thank you. You've done a really good job at pulling all kinds of various aspects that are, I think, quite important in it. I would say the piece I would add is let's all, and I include myself in this because that's in constant evolution, context changes.
Yeah.
We have to stay curious. We have to keep that element of looking for the opportunities to, is this an opportunity to update my plan, to shift, to be agile with how I had defined this action in my plan? Because the more we are curious about this, now we're in a growth mindset type of mode. We are learning. We are adapting as needed. We will need a lot of that going forward. And so if we have that mindset as we approach the resilience plan, our resilience in general, the evolution of our context, I think that keeps us in an exciting, positive, and practical way to stay resilient.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, as you look at some of the really great leaders that you've worked for or that you've read about, that element of curiosity is always there, isn't it?
It's a good one.
It's a good one.
It's useful that's part of what grid gives us. Creative ideas, brings innovation, sets up teams to be more innovative, and it applies here too.
I want to ask you to wrap up with what are 3 top takeaways. But before we get there, I'm a huge fan of tokens and rituals. Mm-hmm. What ritual do you have that keeps you resilient? Is there something you try to do every day or every week, and how do you keep track and how do you hold yourself accountable?
Yes. So there's a few. But my most recent, possibly evolution, because I've been on this for a long time, a lot, and that's true for many professionals and leaders. Mm-hmm. Many professionals and leaders tend to recover in a very active way. Mm-hmm. Run, cycle, walk, we're active. Yet, we know from research, meditation needs to be part of the mix. So I have been trying to apply my own recommendations for a long time in shorter ways. For me, it has become a commitment to keeping the meditation, increasing its length over time. And especially if I feel I don't need the time or don't need it.
That's when you need it the most, yeah.
Sit down, put the thing on and do it. And do it with agility. So it has, in my case, what allows me to keep it is to be agile in the length. So, okay, I'm up to 20 minutes. For me, it's a massive deal right now.
That's a long time.
It's like 2 days, basically. Yeah. So, but I'm giving myself the option, which that one I cannot say no to, of 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And so 2 minutes, no one does not have 2 minutes. And so therefore that allows me to keep this
Yeah.
That works out.
You know, my son gave me a great mantra. He said, Dad, anything worth doing is worth doing badly. You said 20 minutes, you only did 2. It was still good that you did 2. You did it badly. Yes. You also did it. Isn't that interesting? Yes. Curiosity. And the meditation piece for me always means reflection. Yeah. That time do you journal? Do you do anything like that? Do you encourage people? Or I know a lot of these things are individual.
Yeah. I've done various things in phases. So yes, I've personally done that. But you know what I would say is on that front, I would say, and sometimes people ask me, which one, or even they'll say, okay, meditation, when? Morning, evening?
Exactly.
And my first
how
response,
long? Where do I sit?
Well, exactly. So my first response, and you'll hear how practical I am even there, I'll say, whatever will make you do it, I'll take that. So if for you, it is whatever it is and whenever it is, if it is what you need for you to do it, take this, because that's the main thing. Then you can always shift it. And yeah, sure, if I can do my meditation in the morning, that will be better for me. But anytime's better than no time. And that's often what I say. Anything's better than nothing.
Yeah, find what works for you. I'm with you. Some people, it's got to be a rigorous workout. For other people, it's just a walk in the woods. Yeah, so find out what works. Yeah. Okay. So we're in the lightning round here. 3 top takeaways. We've had a wonderful discussion. If there were 3 things you wanted people to take away, what might they be?
Yes. And in that order. Sometimes they're not specific order. I will say this one is actually in that order. And you will not, yes, maybe, but sometimes most people will not like the first one because they're not attracted to it, which is the sign that you need to actually increase your self-awareness.
Okay.
Really. Not just, moving on. Realistically looking at the actual demands you have, including the positive and all the ones, personal and professional, really. Because we talked about the impact on emotional intelligence, it will influence everything else. If you have to do only one, this is the one. But ideally, you do that. And you do create your strategic plan now based on what we've identified for your context. You've identified for your context. You are strategic. Stepping back doesn't take long. That makes a huge difference if you do it. And then implement these actions. And it's not a situation where we have to boost you or motivate you to do these actions, because if you've done this process, the way I'm suggesting you do it here, the actions will be so doable. And that's what people say to me. They say, I thought this was going to be a complicated, big deal thing that I would have to carve out hours to do. No. You identify it, you do it, builds your self-efficacy right there, and you're off. So these would be the 3.
So increase your self-awareness, do your plan, and then implement the plan.
That's right. Yes.
Very simple. If you're just tuning in at the very end, you can listen to the recording, but this is the book, The Resilience Plan. She goes by MH, but Marie-Helene is such a beautiful name. I wouldn't shortchange that. Available at fine bookstores everywhere. It's practical. It's not overwhelming. It's been a delight to spend some time with you.
Same.
I would just say that this is an important book. It's a book that people need. It's very much right now, like as you said, focus more demands than ever. I've taken pages of notes as we've talked. I hope you have too. What a delight. Just one last thing I would say to you is, on your book, sell 1 million.
Oh, sell it. Well, thank you.
Don't leave me here. Give me a fist bump.
There you go.
Been a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you, Jester. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.